Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Welcome to MOQ, everybody. This is the Notewell. If you somehow haven't managed to read this already, please do it. It's about intellectual property considerations and the code of conduct. Meeting tips. I think everyone knows how to do the meeting now. Use Meet Echo to queue. If this is your reminder to scan, if you're present in person here, to use the QR codes that are around the room to scan them and indicate your attendance at the session, and also be able to participate in the queue. So if you haven't done that already, please go scan the QR code by every microphone and also at the back of the room. Okay, our agenda is pretty packed for an hour. Administrivia has enlarged to cover a bunch of other stuff, our interop report, and some discussion about upcoming interims. And then we're going to bring up Mo to talk about his lock update. And as part of that, we will conduct a adoption call to supplement the one on the list. And then lastly, Will is going to present his PR for auth. In our Denver interim, we kind of agreed on a basic approach for authentication in MOQ, and he will present that PR. Daniel has graciously agreed to scribe again. He's now lapping the field in scribing, so the rest of you do better. Okay, interop. Daniel, do you want to come to the mic and just talk through the slides? You can just do it from the floor if you would like, in the interest of time.
Yeah, so we had interop on Saturday and Sunday and a little bit during the week. We had a pretty good showing, about six people here, and I think Giovanni was also doing it remote. Everyone who was interoping was at least draft 8 and above, and 4 were draft 10. The differences between 8 and 10 are not huge, so that's actually great. As far as control message interop, we got lots of new implementations. Coda and Yuki both were able to do interop in person. They both have draft 10 compliant, and we're able to do a lot with Meet Echo, Moxygen, and Cisco. The interesting stuff is this time we also added a couple of media-based interop demonstrations. Coda's used a streaming demo. Suhas has a video-based demo that was able to relay over Meet Echo. We didn't quite get it to work over Moxygen, but we got farther. And very recently, Matt Joris also completed an Android app demo that relays over Moxygen. We'd like to test it on other platforms, but that's as far as we got. And finally, we have started adding some new logging and debugging extensions. The big one was the QLog extension, which Meet Echo has full support for, as well as a few have some other levels of support. And we were able to pass records between those and use it for a bit of debugging. And also we got a little bit with Cullen's serialization format. So lots of new developments. This is the updates to the matrix. Draft 10, we only got a few that went through, but that's all new. And then all the ones highlighted in red are updated for draft 8 from where it was at the Denver interop.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you for accepting your deputy role with Mike out of commission this weekend. I did forget to give everyone an opportunity to bash the agenda, so I will take a moment now in case somebody has an issue. Okay. The last chair discussion, chair point for today until the end is upcoming interims. So as is our tradition at this point, we will have bi-weekly virtual interims. They're purely virtual interims that are 1 hour long. And you can see there the dates we have planned over the next month, and then and then the time. That information will be available on the meeting information is already on the data tracker. Furthermore, we discussed at our Denver interim, the next hybrid interim location. We have tentatively announced it as Stockholm. We previously tentatively announced it as Stockholm, dates 5 through 7 May, with the first day being interop and the next 2 days being issue discussion. And there's been a period of comment on the list that concluded yesterday. However, if this will be sort of the last chance if anyone would like to raise any concerns or issues about the interim date or location, please do so now. Okay, then let's just consider this a formal confirmation of the date and location of the interim. I would say it's safe at this point to make travel arrangements to attend. However, we have not quite nailed down the precise location of the Stockholm metro area, so I would not put down a deposit on any lodging or accommodations you might make. But in terms of other travel arrangements, I think it's safe to do so.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If anyone needs a letter of invitation, please tell the chairs now so that we can work on getting them to you as soon as possible. So.
All right, with that, I'll invite in Mo to talk about his law draft. If I can find it. There it is.
It's kind of cozy over here.
I'll hand it over. There, give him the thingy.
Thank you. So this is the low overhead container media format on behalf of co-authors Suhas and Peter. To recap, it's the low overhead container that's an alternative to CMAF. It's based on web codecs rather than CMAF because we wanted a compact representation, both low wire overhead and low runtime overhead if you're interfacing with web codecs. And so why did we choose web codecs? Because web codecs has already gone through the trouble of enumerating all of the main codecs of interest for a lot of the MOQ applications. And they define the wrappers over the elementary bit streams for audio and video. We call them encoded audio and video chunks. And that's what this draft is referring to. We don't actually require web codecs. You can use this outside of a web browser, but we refer to that registry in order to save a lot of redundant specification in IANA registries. And this was an alternative to CMAF because of the high overhead of CMAF, which becomes mostly prohibitive for audio, hundreds of bytes. And it's also a lot more complex in parsing, a lot more logic required. So this is intended to be much lower overhead for real-time apps. So changes in version 5. The main thing that was resolved was for video formats that have multiple different formats in the web codecs registry. There's basically things that are like storage formats, like MP4, and there's conferencing formats like Annex B. You can choose one of those two things in web codecs, and how to harmonize that in LOC was kind of confusing when we were looking at MOQ and some other implementations. And so what we've landed on is being able to support both of those formats, but being explicit about recommendations. So for parameter sets, and that's things like the things that precede a keyframe. Whenever you send a keyframe, you need the parameter sets or metadata to help decode it. Those can be either in-band in the payload, which is what we recommend. And those are the newer style bindings, MP4, AVC3, and HEV1 bindings. We recommend them to be in band. We also allow for them to be out of band, so they can be in an extension header. And we define an extension header called the config extension that can carry this. This is typically called extra data in other standards. A second major point in these formats is how each individual chunk of video data is prefixed, whether you prefix it with a start code, 001, or whether you prefix it with a length prefix. And we recommend the length prefixes, which is the common way to do it in MP4 or CMAF. But we also allow them to be start codes, which is the common way to Annex B. So again, we have recommendations, but we also allow the alternative style. So this is more detail if you want to understand what those parameter sets and prefixes really mean. The one notable thing here is that there is a bug in web codecs that we need to work to resolve. When you use the new codec strings, the new MP4 codec strings, AVC3 and HEV1, web codecs is supposed to output the right thing, and it doesn't. It's supposed to output parameter sets in band, it's supposed to output length prefixes. It ends up not doing that. It does the old way instead, silently failing. So we just need to get a fix filed and issued for web codecs to support those new formats properly. It's okay for LOC for now because we still support both ways. So it's not a problem for current implementations to interop with. You can still do extra data header extension formats. The open issues that are left, the main one is where the metadata lives. This is the metadata things like extra data itself, the config parameters, or object level metadata like timestamps, audio energy level. Right now, the current draft uses the existing object header extensions that were recently merged. There's been talk about maybe using a payload header instead, which is what the original version of LOC specified. So we can talk about that later. There's a separate slide on that. The rest are pretty minor. Web codecs issue, I already mentioned it. It's just a matter of getting W3C to fix that. We're going to move the catalog out of the LOC draft and into the warp draft, because warp deals with all of the catalog semantics. There's a minor issue with the odd and even extension types. There's an issue there that we think is a better way forward. And then finally, there was earlier talk about what to call this, whether we should call it LOC or whether it should be called web codecs format, WCF or something, which I think is what MOQ is referring to it as. And then we'd like to go ahead and adopt the current version if there's no disagreement. And I'll mention the final open issue that we can fix in the first working group version.
Great. I have a. So Magnus Westlund as individual here. I am nothing against adopting this in general life. I just note that the fact that this web codecs registry do have some downsides when it comes to registering codecs who's not already there. And in certain cases, if you being active and driving this in WCC might not be easy for everyone based on IPR rules, etc. in WCC. So, but
to make it more concrete, web codecs does not have a VVC entry today. I think it'll be upon one of us to request that to do the work to get that registered, or any other codec of interest that people want to use over MOQ.
All right, we interrupt this presentation to ask the audience a few questions. Get out your devices. First question is, how many of you have read a recent version of the LSC draft? Please use your phone, not the, or laptop or tablet, rather than your actual physical hands. Just waiting for it to stabilize. Does anyone need more time? Okay. Let the record show that 10 people claim to have read it. I will say that the adoption call is ongoing on a list right now. You have about 3 days left to reply there. So if you want to wait, rather than offering your opinion now, that's a choice you can make. And here's the big question, should we adopt this draft? Again, you're welcome to instead use the list if you don't feel able to answer right now, but I suspect that many of you are able to answer it now. Does anyone need more time? Yes. They're so impressed by the presentation, or they just have so much faith and confidence in Mo they're ready to adopt whatever he's bringing. Okay. All right, I think we can close it. Let the record show that 21 people are in favor of adopting it and 0 are opposed. So 21 are in favor and 0 are opposed. That is a pretty good signal. As always, we will wait for the list call to conclude, but things are looking good for you, Mo, or bad, depending on how you look at it. And now, please continue with your presentation.
Okay, do we have more time?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so the only thing I'd like to get clarity on is, assuming all those other items, everyone agrees to go ahead and adopt. Metadata location is the only thing that we failed to get consensus on in Denver. To clarify what that is, this is the current format in LOC version 5. So if you look at it, the entire mock object, it has a header, which includes the header extensions, and then it has the payload. And what version 5 says is that that mock payload maps exactly to the LOC payload. And they're both the internal data of the web codecs encoded audio video chunks. And that's the exact elementary bit stream of the target codec with no encapsulation, no other headers, just directly out of the raw codec spec. Then LOC adds header extensions inside a subset of the mock object header extensions. So a subset of the standard mock object header extensions serve as the LOC header extensions. So that's metadata for things like the config extra data, timestamps, audio levels, things like that. The earlier versions had a payload header, so that would be inside of the mock object payload. They had a payload header instead, and that payload header is where we would carry the LOC header extensions and metadata. Pros and cons of these approaches are roughly, this way is the most simple and most symmetric and most efficient on the wire. And for developers, it's kind of clear that payload is payload, headers are headers. There's one unified header space with all the extensions. Some of them may be media extensions for LOC, some of them may be relay extensions or whatever other uses we have for header extensions. On the con side, some people argue that the LOC header extensions are specifically media specific and that media specific things should be barred from the general mock object header extensions. And so we should create another layer of header extensions inside of the mock object payload and use that to home the LOC header extensions. At the end of the day, it would just mean another byte of overhead for the media, because you'd have the LOC header extension length of, number of header extensions or header extension total length, whichever way we encode it. So it would basically be duplicating that LOC object header the mock object header extensions structure again right after it. So there would be a general object header extension, and there would be a media header extensions right after it. That's what we failed to get consensus on in Denver. It was roughly split half and half. Group couldn't reach one way or the other. Arguments on both sides. Since we didn't have consensus, we left the draft as is. So I'd like to try to close it out.
You've got a queue of now 4, 5.
Colin, go ahead.
Hey, please be brief.
So, Colin Jakes, I think that the issue that drives this has nothing to do, this is just like, we could have the bytes here, we could have the bytes there. That doesn't make any difference. The issue that drives this is the end-to-end crypto draft, and it totally assumes the other way. And I think we have to, that's really where we're going to have to make a decision about this. And if we start needing, I did go and look at the audio stuff. Right, this makes a relevant difference to small audio packets, and our small audio packets are already greatly larger than RTP, which Mo figured out. So I think that we need to, if we're going, so far we've been assuming it was as the first stuff where we could fully end-to-end encrypt everything that's in the MOQ payload. But we obviously need some of that information to be available for diagnostic stuff outside of that, which is why we had the header extensions like they are. So that works well for the current assumptions. But if we're going to change that, we start getting into, we're going to need to have partial encryption of the MOQ payload, and that's going to take more lengths to indicate what that is. I would just rather leave the end-to-end object security assumptions like they are right now. And when we get serious about that draft, if we decide we need to change that, then go and change it. But I like the way it is right now.
Suhas.
So I just wanted to plus one, Cullen, because while writing the secure objects draft, this is exactly the topic that came to discussion. Thinking about if we need to update new extension, should we always go back and update the secure objects draft, which makes no sense. We need to identify what extensions need that end-to-end protection with some additional data where the AEID schemes requires. Other than that, at this point in time, we don't have that information to make decisions. So my vote will also be to say stay with what we have until we decide that.
Go ahead, Will.
Yes, so I think my opinion on this is the opposite of Cullen and Suhas. I strongly am in favor of decoupling the header extensions from any type of payload extension. The header extensions, I believe the intent is that they are used for routing content and they are payload agnostic. And I think it's important to keep that architectural divide if we want MOQ to work at scale and for MOQ transport to work across a lot of payload types that are not media. The 1 byte tax, I think, is de minimis for video. It does have an effect for very low bitrate audio, but I still think that would be a tax worth paying for the decoupling. Additionally, I want lock to be able to use in a media workflow, right? So I want FFmpeg to make it and send it somewhere else. So it might be used outside of environments in which MOQ transport is there. In that case, defining a header set and using that header set, I think is appropriate. It would allow it to be used outside of MOQ transport and therefore be more useful in the media workflow. And the last point is that the point on encryption, that we want to encrypt the media specific information. I don't believe it's that much of an overhead to have an encryption scheme that either encrypts your media headers and your payload or some fraction. It's a flag, a bit flag here or there as to what that is. And again, I would prefer long-term for MOQ that we decouple the two.
So just one quick comment on one of Will's points. The using this outside of MOQ. We did discuss that at some point, and I thought that the consensus was don't bother trying to specify anything that's generic and agnostic to the transport. Right now, the current draft is tightly bound to MOQ. We removed the sequence number. We're using the object ID and the group ID for sequencing. We're not, we would need more extensions to come back in if we wanted to live outside of MOQ-T. And I thought that we decided not to do that.
Yeah, Magnus Westerner's individual question around there. Is there any of these extensions that you currently know of that actually have privacy implications if they were left outside of the end-to-end context, security context?
Yes. So there's been debate about the audio level header extension because some people feel that it leaks some information. Unfortunately, that happens to be the header extension that the entities that don't want to decode the payload care about in order to be able to route opaque payloads intelligently. So there's kind of a
I just want to note on that, all of this stuff is inside the encrypted TLS connection, right? So none of it's outside that.
Yeah, I think the question here is visibility at relays. Is there an attack vector that the relay network itself can compromise the privacy of the media?
Do you have an issue on that we could discuss this on already, or this particular point? It was on an issue, or Or
We can open an issue. There's
Yeah.
not, I don't believe there's an issue on,
Mm.
on this. I think that there've been issues in the past on the, Will's issue originally had extensive discussion about whether this is relay specific behavior or whether payloads should be prohibited. Media level things should be prohibited or not. Does it have to be actionable by a relay network? Otherwise, it's not an extension.
Yeah, I ask him so we have a point where we can continue the discussion. So because I think we have to move on now.
I can create on specifically the security considerations, on the privacy considerations.
Okay.
I'll create an issue for it.
Thank you, Mo. As I said, I think in 3 days, we're going to conclude the adoption call. And so barring anything spectacular happening there, Monday or earliest opportunity, you can upload a draft IETF version of this document. Thank you.
And I'll submit 00 as is, and then 01 shortly after, removing the things that we agree that remove the catalog, move it to warp and
Yeah,
the font
so a quick
fixes.
process question. So once it's adopted, should we move the draft to the MOQ working group GitHub?
That would be ideal.
Cool.
Thank you, Mo. Will, you're up next.
Okay, you should have the slides.
Yeah, I'm flailing with the slide thing right now. Pardon me a minute. There we go. V1, correct?
Yeah.
Is this the
Okay,
right one?
thank you.
All right. I'm passing you slide control, so it's all you.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Will Law from Akamai. I'm going to present CAT for MOQT, Authentication and Access Control for MOQ Transport. This is a draft that I've written, but they're acknowledging input from Gwendol, from Cullen, and from Suhas, and from discussions that we had in Denver. Let's see if it's working. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat what was done at Denver. There was the chairs put out a call for a schema to provide authentication, access control, and also action control. Where can clients connect, and what can clients do once they're connected within a MOQ transport network? The proposal I presented there identified token auth as a practical mechanism for doing that. It proposed use of an existing standard, which is CTA's Common Access Token. It's a token specifically designed to provide a common level of access control against, certainly in the HTTP world for HLS and Dash, against multiple CDNs. So there's an ecosystem being developed. Just this morning, an open source implementation of CAT was released by Ivin in Sweden, along with a validation toolset. So we'll get the beginnings of a workflow that we can inherit here. And there's some harmonization with the adaptive segmented side of media. The chairs requested 2 actions following that meeting. First was a draft to show how it all might work. So I've started that draft. The link is there, CAT for MOQ. There's a QR code if you can't click the PDF. And then they also assigned an action item to reach out to CTA Wave, which is the standards body that created CAT, as we call it, and asked them about the feasibility of extending it with a new MOQ specific claim. So I did have that meeting on March 10th. And the advice from Wave was, we'd love you to use CAT, but we don't need to extend it. You can simply define your own CBOR additional CBOR claim, and then you can just extend it. So that puts the control all in our hands, which I think is an excellent outcome. And they also offered their help in constructing that MOQ specific claim, which I think will be very useful and make sure that it is compliant with the existing CAT spec. Just a picture for those not familiar with how token workflows work. They work at scale in CDNs. I work at a CDN, and so do multiple people. We're issuing several million of these every hour and also validating them. So we have a client, it's with the YouTube logo looking TV. It'll authenticate to some backend system. It'll log in, might be 2-factor auth password that is out of the scope of this group. And it's usually done over HTTPS. That auth system generates a token and gives it to the client. And the auth system is also sharing a secret with the relay network or the CDN that the client will be connecting to. The client then provides this token when it connects. So the one utility of the token is to protect the actual connection. If the relay network is satisfied with that, it allows the connection to be established. Once the client's connected, and this is a real difference with the HTTP side of the world, which is all request-based, now we have this pipe on which we can start implementing MOQ transport actions. And we do want to be able to control what the client can subscribe to, what it can fetch, what it can publish, etc. And that is the other point of this token. So just a brief slide on Common Access Token. It's built here. It's based on a lot of other prior IETF work, specifically CBOR web tokens and CBOR object signing and encryption. It is binary, which gives us compactness, which is also of interest to this group. And it provides a wide set of claims that are very useful in controlling media. The issuer, the audience, the token ID, the network, the URL, the AES, the time of day, the geolocation, a lot of details about URLs. It supports renewal and it supports a fixed set of encryption algorithms. It also supports signing. So if it was not clear from the diagram, there's two layers we need to protect. The first one is the initial connection, which for MOQ transport can happen either via web transport or via native QUIC. And in both of these, there's the Common Access Token can work off the shelf because they're URI based. Once we're connected, then there's currently 4 actions that we can take. This list shows 5 because I updated it based on the earlier discussion where the notion of a publish verb was added. So we should, including publish in this talk, even if we don't adopt it eventually, it doesn't matter. The other 4 are there today. These are all the control messages that carry an auth field, which today is specified as an ASCII field just for convenience, but I think there's a PR, I have a PR that changes that to be a binary array. It's just a blob of data that is transmitted from client to server. So the initial connection, again, we can use, by using CAT, we can protect it via any one of these claim types that are shown below. I won't go into all of these. A lot of tokens just use expiration, but there's much richer schemas you can use to protect the connection. And this, I think, is simple. The problem lies as we go forward is how do we authorize MOQ actions with the same token? So I don't necessarily want to have to provide one token for connection and another one for subscribe and publish. So if you look at all of these verbs, they can all be constrained by defining the namespace and name, and it's a tuple, so I'm just showing them as both, and applying some type of match. So for each action, we can create something we call a permission, and the permission is very simple. One is 0 is just everything's allowed. You can subscribe or publish to any namespace, any name. 1 can be an exact match. We give you exactly, you can only subscribe to this and nothing else. And then the third option is a prefix match. And the other notion is that, sorry, I'll just go to the next slide. I think it illustrates this. Some simple text. So we're showing this with text, but remember everything is just binary arrays. So if you do an exact match of example.com/Bob, you can only publish, subscribe, announce that, and it prohibits everything else, including where that is a prefix. And a prefix match of Bob is also very simple. It allows Bob, it allows anything to the right of that, but nothing above it. This is not too complex, but I think, although it's very simple, this gives a lot of control because the structuring of these namespaces is fully under control of the same system, the same content distributor who's vending the tokens. We do need to create a new CWT claim. So I'm proposing we create one called MOQT that carries the information I just described. So there's a very sort of rough CDDL. We need some help with constructing this correctly here. But when we do it, it needs to encode the 5 actions, which we can simply enumerate. And then for each action, the 3 levels of permission, along with an optional byte prefix that you have to match for permission types 1 and 2. So it is not that complex, smart transport, and it's extensible. If we invent new actions in the future, we can simply extend the type field. The challenge comes here. What I'm putting under the broad title of composite claims, but the use case is, imagine you want to allow people to connect and subscribe from anywhere in Europe after 4 p.m. that you can only publish after 6 p.m. from Germany. It's a bit of a contrived case, but it's showing that basically in the same token, I want there to be two-time claims, or expiry claims, or not before claims. So one solution to this problem is we can give the client different CAT tokens for each action. The second solution would be, there's a draft out there from Chris Lemons proposing composite claims, where we can bind claims together. So we could say, I'll take the MOQ subscribe claim and I'll bind it with an expiry claim. And I'll take a MOQ publish claim and I'll bind it with another expiry claim. And I was all excited about this approach in Denver. However, I've realized that CWD tokens don't allow a claim to be repeated. So we can't specify 2 expiry claims within the same token and have them apply to different actions. So option 3 is we can say, okay, well then any expiry claim has to apply equally to all actions, which essentially prohibits that use case I just described. In other words, you could only connect and publish and do everything based upon one set of time constraints. Fourth option, we can create a wrapper which combines several CAT tokens together. And in retrospect, I think this is a reasonable idea. So let me show you what that might look like. All right. Is either person in the queue? Okay, let me just go. Sorry, Jerry's just interrupt.
Yeah, is anyone in the queue here for a clarifying question, or just waiting for? Okay, keep going on, Will. Although I will note that in the chat, many people are offering to help with the CDDL, so that's exciting.
Oh, that's exciting to me. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so here's the concept of a wrapper, right? So I want to give the client multiple CAT tokens, but the client, I don't want to know anything about the token structure, right? It's just a binary blob. I give it to the client and the client gives it to a relay. So we can create a very simple wrapper. In it, I can put a number of CAT tokens and I give them an ID 1, 2, 3. And then I specify all my actions and I tell them which of these tokens should be applied for which action. And then I bind the whole thing with a signature. So the CAT tokens are going to be encrypted, right? This part, the action part would not be encrypted, but the signature would ensure that we're not messing with assigning different tokens to different actions. And here's what the serialization would look like. We just declare how many tokens. It might just be 1, okay? And in fact, in the majority of use cases, it probably is just 1. Type length value for that. And then the actions, we list how many actions. Again, might just be 1. And then which token to apply for that action. And the idea is the token vendor says, okay, I know how to wrap these CAT tokens in this wrapper. I would synthesize this package, give it to my client. My client does not have to parse this. The client just gives the whole thing to the relay. The relay parses this. It figures out, oh, the client's connecting. So I'm going to decrypt token number 1, validate it, and use it. And it can store the decrypted version in memory. It can apply an alias, etc. So that's the proposal. So it's not that we allow multiple claims within CAT, but we use CAT as it is. We add in each one of these that MOQ claim, the claim that I mentioned previously, because we want that still to be encrypted. And then we just wrap them in a simple layer. So that's one thing for discussion. And then I've just listed 2 slides on issues. One is an issue around token revocation, right? So imagine we issue a token, it gets out there, the bad pirate is using it to leak data. And with CAT, we have a single ID, but the idea is, what if we just want to stop this person publishing or subscribing, but not actually connecting or doing one or the other? So do we want to revoke a subset of actions? Now, before that prior slide, this was complex, but I think the notion that if we have a wrapper and we assign an ID to each one, we can issue a revocation against that token and simply say which of the IDs we want to revoke, and that would revoke just that action. So this issue, I think, if we adopt that prior wrapper, as a very simple solution. If not, then we have to think about what level of revocability we want to provide in MOQ transport. And then last slide is on token renewal. So if you look at CAT today, there's explicitly 4 methods around which a token can be renewed. They're all built for HTTP liveries, and none of them is really useful for us. Cookies, headers, and redirection. Specifically, this one's banned in web transport, and this one we're negotiating. So how can we do this in MOQ? So we could the relay renew the token for a client if the relay had business logic that says, I allow you to renew this client. So we could have a new control message. We can just invent it, carries the auth ID of a token along with the new token. You could argue, what's the point of the relay giving the token to the client so the client can give it back to the relay? There's an argument to be had there. It could just renew it itself on the server side. Out of band, you can say it's someone else's problem. We don't need to do this. Third, you can piggyback on an extension header of an object. You just send it, the client receives it, decodes that extension, knows to look for it because it supports token renewal, and then it receives the token. For a client that's publishing it, we could send it on a subscribe update. So you publish into the relay subscribes to you and sends an update. We can invent some other mechanism if you have a smart idea. And we can even question, do we need to renew tokens? Because with HTTP, you have a lot of independent requests, right? There's nothing binding them together. But MOQ transport is different. We have this persistent, secure connection. So what's the use case under which we trust a client at one point, but we need to renew that same client, even though we've maintained a persistent, secure, and trusted connection with? That is the last slide. So I'm happy to go to questions.
Chris, you're up.
Yeah. So, hi, this is Chris, Comcast. I am a significant contributor to the Common Access Token, and am excited to see it here. I think it's actually a pretty good fit for purpose. I do want to clarify a couple of things. Number one, the Common Access Token is just built on CWTs. So all you have to do is register a CWT claim in order to make it work. That makes it nice and easy to extend, as was mentioned. The other thing on the composite claims, the AND claim does allow you to repeat explicitly. Allows you to repeat a claim. So normally, you're right, you can't have 2 expiry claims within the same base claim set, but the way the AND claim works, in fact, in your example, you would use an OR claim, right? You would have an OR claim, you have a single OR claim that says something like either, and then the first claim set in the OR would be subscribe in Europe. And then the second claim set would be publish in Germany with different expirations in each of those claim sets. And so that problem is actually readily handled. The main advantage of having multiple tokens as opposed to multiple claim sets in the same token is that they can be signed by different issuers. I'm not sure how practical or how useful that is in practice, but it is a significant advantage of having multiple tokens.
So Chris, just which would you prefer then as an action? Trying to, because the composite claims are not supported. It would have to get your draft approved and pushed through IETF. Would you rather go down that road, or would you rather go along the route of a wrapper, which we could use today?
My suspicion is that the wrapper is going to be a heavier lift on the relays. You have to process. You have to reprocess the signature for every single token that you have, And my feeling is that most of the implementers, one of the things that the implementers have been extremely conscious of is the cost of evaluating these contexts. And so doubling, tripling, even quadrupling these costs may lend people in practice to feel like, well, we could use finer grained access control where necessary, but it costs us too much. And so it would be nice if that was not expensive. There is another option though, and that is both, right? Because they both have different semantics, and provided some interest in the composite claims draft in the COSI working group. I suspect that it is a very simple and straightforward draft. It would be pretty easy to get moving.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close the queue soon, so if you want to say something, get in it immediately. Thanks. Colin.
Colin Joyce. Will, first, thanks for downloading this. I really like this. I think it's a good direction to go. Chris Lemon, I really would love to be able to drag you more into helping advise us on all of this, since you've clearly thought about a lot. So what I got up to say here is, this is a little bit different than HTTP or something like that, in the sense where at the time you got the GET request, you would evaluate the token, and you would probably never evaluate it again as you served all the data out of that GET request. Or maybe you do. I don't know how it works in CDNs. But what I'm concerned about here is I get, say, I authenticate a subscribe request, and then I presume I have to basically do it on every, let's say on publish, on every object, because something, the IP address could have moved from Germany to France. And that can happen on each individual publish. And these things are lasting, months in some cases. And we have to have the check at the expiry. So because of that, I'm thinking of this around from what I know from our switches, where we try and take this complex set of rules that are in the token and then compile them into some sort of positive set of very simple ACL style rules that are being applied real time. And when I start seeing that we have both positive and negative permissions mixed in the same statement in some ways, that gets really hard to do. So I'd want to think really carefully about how often this got evaluated, what we needed to evaluate on each, not when I'm not worried about, hey, I got a publish message. I'm worried about each object I get in that track for that publish message. I need to reevaluate something, and what that something is, and how I go from whatever this complex thing is to that. And if that meant that we just had to have overall simpler tokens and couldn't represent some of the really complex cases, I'd probably wave that way. I'm not arguing one way or another on this. I'm arguing that we have to figure out how these things get evaluated and look at it, and probably get a little bit more implementation experience might make this more obvious. Thanks.
And just a quick reply to Cullen. In my mind view of this, we're only evaluating it 5 times at most. You're gonna evaluate, is this user allowed to subscribe, right? And after that, you don't reevaluate the token. As new objects come in, you as a relay already have to know that there's an active subscription. If you don't have an active subscription, you're going to block those objects.
Let me walk you through this example. So the subscribe comes in at noon, but the expiry time is 1 p.m. Does that subscription disappear at 1 p.m., right? Like,
Yes. If you're only authorized to subscribe until 1 p.m., you do have to set some logic loop, but it's not on every object arriving. It's on some other
it's a timer on the subscription or something,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that gets a little bit more complicated when the times one value when that gets mixed in with the IP address. And the quick connection allows me to change the IP address without redoing the subscription. I just think we need to reason through how those things would all fit together. And if the model is we just, when you get the subscribe, you evaluate the token and set up some boundaries and some timers, like if this thing ever changes, you got to redo it. That's great, I'm done. But if we are allowing that you have to do something on every object, then that seems scary.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So Has, I strongly feel that we should spend some time on the revocation and renewal mechanism first before we go into composite claims, because that drives some of these discussions. And having to, as a first step, if you're landing something for implementation experience, I would like to go with having tokens being separate. And the composite claims provides a nice way to say these 3 conditions should apply for me, given things that have happened. But we can also achieve the same thing having 3 tokens and defining that, if the tokens come in that order, you need to apply all those 3 tokens in some particular order, and we can get to that requirement without having the composite claims. So to start with, my proposal would be to start with separate tokens and think about how we want to evolve if needed to the composite claims. And last point would be on the PR itself. I was not sure if you wanted to spend some time on any open issues on the PR that you have on the core transport. Thanks.
I have a chair question. Will, can you clarify exactly what your position is on how this relates to the MOQT draft? Like, and the standard, is this all like authentication must be this, or and it's all just in the MOQT draft, or is it a reference in MOQT that's a must implement, but like you can use other things, or is it just a way to do things? And as far as MOQT is concerned, there's just a blob.
I believe my view is it's a way to do things, much like warp streaming format, right? I think MOQT has made provision for a binary blob that's for all, and it's up to outside standards to specify how to use that, because there can be a multiplicity of these. But I also think in the interest of growing MOQ interop, that we should define one clean way of doing. So that's what CAT for MOQ, that's the purpose of it. It's an external RFC that tells you how to deliver consistent authentication that is compliant with the MOQ transport specification. And we would encourage implementers to support it, but not mandate it as part of MOQ transport.
No, so I definitely support having like an authentication story as part of the MOQ package that we deliver. But what you're suggesting has a lot of merit, but it also makes a pure MOQT relay a little problematic, right? Because I can't, if it is just a blob, I cannot authenticate traffic where I don't understand a lot about the payload or what it is I'm delivering.
If it's just a blob, you need some business logic to tell you what to do with that blob. And either our choice is we enforce it. We say you shall at least support CAT for MOQ, and you may support other ones. And that would be a way to make sure that there's a relay that will always support at least one type of authentication. But that's a bigger step. I'm not motivating for or against it. If you feel that it's necessary to get interop that relay should support one type of auth, then CAT for MOQ would be a candidate for that.
Okay, thank you. Mo.
Mosinati, I have a question about the name and namespace. Is it clear to you that we have an unambiguous way to serialize and represent this in CATs? Because I assume that this is all for URIs, right? How do we serialize the name and namespace into something that's unambiguous? Because it has holes.
The exact way we're doing it for subscribe today, right? When you subscribe, you give a namespace and a name, but they don't have to be a URL or URI. They can just be a sequence of bytes.
I know it's a tuple, of up to 32 blobs.
Yeah.
Do the CATs have an unambiguous way to serialize the handle?
Yes. So CAT will have that same 32, the tuple of 32 blobs in it. Now you might choose, CAT's binary, right? You might choose to represent your auth scheme as a URL, in which case, when you define a token, you will then take your text and you'll say exactly how I'm going to serialize it into my binary array, and that's what I'm going to give for matching. But at the end of the day, we're just matching a set of bytes against another set of bytes, and it's either exactly the same or it's the prefix of that bytes. That's the work to be done here.
If it's clear to you, I'll sync up with you offline. It's still
okay.
unclear to me.
I'm pretty sure it'll get you what you want, and I want to assure you that it's not requiring the use of URLs. They're easier to demonstrate, but we don't need them.
Mo, I think this is why we need to write a new claim. If this would be in the new claim that this working group would define as an extension to CAT. That's why it's going to work.
You mean our subject would be so unique that it wouldn't fit the subject rules that are already there?
more or less.
Okay, the queue is closed. Thank you very much, Will. Do you have what you need to move forward with this?
Yeah, I encourage people, there's issues open on the link. Please, let's continue the discussion. I don't think it's ready for a call for adoption yet. It needs to bake more, but hopefully get it to a point. Actually, I don't, well, we might want to adopt it as a reference auth scheme. So yes, that would be the next step, but maybe in a couple of months.
And you have an action item, I presume, to write a PR to link to this draft when it's ready for MOQ.
Well, there's the debate as if we want to do that, right? So I'll open an issue against MOQ on do we want to link to one type of auth.
Thank you very much. All right. I think Alan has something to address.
Hey, everybody. So I have been reflecting on several years of chairing this group and what I'm really good at and what I really want to work on right now. And I think people know that I'm kind of all over GitHub and MOQT. And what I really want to work on is advancing the draft and closing those issues out and writing a lot of text. So I've discussed this with the chairs, with the ADs, and I'm going to step down as chair of the MOQ working group. I hand it over to my current co-chairs who are going to do a great job carrying this forward. They have agreed to bring me on as a co-editor with Ian of the MOQT draft, along with our existing authors. So anyway, I just want to say thanks for everyone who's put up with me since we published the first rush draft in almost 4 years ago in 2021 and had our first set of side meetings and the BOFs and however many cities I've handed you guys chocolate in. So anyway, that's upcoming. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Alan. And we'll try to figure out the chocolate situation. I know that's what you're very worried about. I forgot to unlock the queue, so if people want to say something, they can say something. Especially, Mike, you can always say something.
Yeah. Mike Bishop, just again, thank you for your service so far, and thank you for your continued service.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
And that's actually a great segue to, I don't remember what we did on Monday because there are too many sessions that I'm chairing. But Zahed, if I forgot to do it Monday, thank you for your guidance as AD for the past year that I've been chair and even before that. And I guess you're still listed as the tech advisor according to UDECO, so that's cool.
I realized that today.
So I expect your advice on all problems we have.
Yeah,
can I just throw them at you, put them in your lap? and welcome to Mike Bishop as a new area director. Of course, you know, I think all three of us go way back with Mike from the early QUIC days, which is now a long time ago. Which is scary. So this should be a productive relationship.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for helping me out on those and I hope I could be helpful. And I'm still a tech advisor for you, so use me. Yeah, but you need someone.
Well, we're even coming to your house in a month and a half.
Yes, in May. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that does it. We're even a couple minutes early.
One quick note. Thanks for chatting, Alan, but also thank you so much for all that you've been doing on the GitHub. You've been amazing at keeping all of the issues straight and linked, and I don't think anybody else has been on top of all the issues as much as you. So kudos for that part.
All right. Thank you to our speakers for staying on schedule today. It was a tight hour, and we will see you in Stockholm. And thanks to Daniel for scribing. Never want to forget that.